Oh geez, once again we get lame attempts to debunk libertarianism from someone who hasn't even done a marginal amount of research to figure out what libertarianism even is. This time, it's from the Young Turks, in an idiotic commentary delivered by Hassan Piker.
Wouldn't you like to live in a world where the government didn't interfere in your private life, where you paid minimal taxes and were free to do whatever you wanted to do as long as it didn't infringe on others' freedoms? Well then, you might be a libertarian. Or you might not be a libertarian.
No, that's pretty much a libertarian. If you don't want to initiate force against anyone else, which is the gist of what you just said, then by definition you're a libertarian. It's an adjective, a word with an actual meaning, unlike other political labels today.
But what do libertarians believe in? Well, the core value of libertarianism is small government.
No, it's the non-aggression principle. Really, people, how hard is this to get right? For anyone who's confused, please see my video, Libertarianism and Property Rights from First Principles.
Which is a vague concept meaning pretty much whatever any individual libertarian wants it to mean.
Yeah, so this is what we keep seeing over and over again. They completely miss our core principle so they can claim that everything we believe is just arbitrary and not the result of a logical deduction from first principles.
So anything from keeping the government out of your bedroom to the privatization of almost every function of government, from education to the police force, can fall under the libertarian agenda.
Yes, because all of those positions are about removing aggression from our lives.
So it really shouldn't be a surprise that fiscally conservative Republicans are more likely to vote libertarian than Democrats.
How many times do we have to point out how untrue this is? When polls are broken down, they show that libertarians get votes equally from Democrats and Republicans. Our presidential candidate, Gary Johnson, is actually getting more support from Democrats than Republicans. This is the cultist mindset, the in-group and the out-group, the we and the not we. Everyone on my team is the we, and everyone else, regardless of how different they might be, all get lumped into the same category of the not we. And the not we you can hate. You can lie about. You can turn your empathy off completely. That's the whole point of it.
However, on social issues, some of the libertarian policy positions are actually more progressive than an Occupy Wall Street drum circle.
Please don't call these progressive. As I and others have shown, the progressive movement was born out of the eugenics movement. They didn't change their policies one whit. Minimum wage, occupational licensing, the progressive income tax, antitrust legislation, welfare, even the corporatization of labor unions were intended and still have the effect of marginalizing the poor as well as blacks and other minorities. And modern progressives, in the form of social justice warriors, are nothing more than modern-day Marxists. Just replace bourgeois with patriarchy or white privilege or whatever. That's antithetical to libertarianism. In the areas he's talking about, like gay marriage, this is a case of progressives becoming like libertarians, not the other way around. I've shown before how the Libertarian Party was for gay marriage pretty much since its founding in 1971, at a time when Democrats were still debating whether to oppose sodomy laws. Even Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage until 2013. But what can you expect from the same movement that filibustered the Civil Rights Act in the Senate?
A libertarian stance on social issues include making prostitution legal and legalizing all drugs, even the good ones.
Yes, and how many Democrats are in favor of those? They're fighting it almost as much as the Republicans are. I'll never understand how, when it comes to abortion, it's the woman's body, so it's her right to choose. But it's not her right to choose all of a sudden when it comes to using her body for prostitution or consuming a drug.
Libertarians also believe that no military action should be taken against foreign nations unless the U.S. is attacked first.
Unlike the warmonger the Democrats put up for president. Really, if you like all of these things, the Libertarians are really your only choice.
All of which sounds great to me. But what doesn't sound as great are libertarian ideals on the economic front.
What, you mean like basing economic policy on the reality of what those policies actually do? Or basing it on the idea that it's immoral to intrude in the peaceful and voluntary exchange between two or more individuals? Because that's pretty much libertarian economic policy there.
Libertarianism comes down to the belief that the principles that drive a free market economy can be applied to how humans govern themselves. It's this idea that an invisible hand that guides the free market will also drive human interaction with social order. This foundation is one that I disagree with, because when unchecked, man motivated by self-gain will not ultimately do the right thing.
And who decides what is the right thing?
This is why there are criminals, those who commit crimes even when there is a system that actively tries to prevent it.
Criminals are people who have initiated force against others. We have no problem with defense and the justice system being used against them in response, at least when it's an actual initiation of force, not having a few ounces of a plant.
And then the whole purpose of civilization should be to ensure that everyone is fed, clothed, housed, and not to create conditions so that the few can secure a substantially greater portion of resources while others are virtually left with nothing.
And as I have shown, the only system that comes anywhere close to that is a free market. Free markets result in better income and wealth equality, fewer people living in poverty, better upward mobility, a lower gender pay gap, better prosperity, and even a better environment. We know this not only empirically from the data, at least when that data isn't blatantly cherry-picked, but we know the economic theory as to why this is the case. Whereas a managed economy ultimately gives you Venezuela.
So in a libertarian society, who protects the unprotected?
Whoever wants to. But in a non-libertarian society, who protects people from the biggest murderers of all? Government. In the 20th century, governments murdered 262 million people, not counting wars or capital punishment, whereas there were only 9 million private murders in that same time period. Here we see the cult of the omnipotent state rearing its ugly head. Only government can protect people, even though government is nothing more than a group of people. Once again, this is ascribing to government supernatural powers. It's the right to keep and bear arms that is our best protection against all of that. And before you go and complain about all the supposed harms of people owning guns, see my video, How to Argue for Gun Control, and before you even think about bringing up mass shootings, look at the statistics in America does not have more mass shootings, deal with it. All of the available data show that we're much better off with gun ownership, and that pretty much every single issue progressives fearmonger about happening with armed citizens is already happening with government to a much greater degree.
Who defends the rights of the defenseless?
To answer this question, we need to ask whom rights need to be defended from. When the founders wrote Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, they were not doing this to protect people from criminals or even foreign invaders. They knew that the rights of the people need to be protected from their own government. Putting government in charge of defending those rights is putting the fox in charge of the henhouse.
Even libertarians acknowledge that a free market will drive a larger wealth disparity.
No, in fact, I just showed you data demonstrating that the opposite is the case.
Which some believe will be offset by the trickling down of wealth and technology.
What's that even supposed to mean?
But wealth inequality paired with deregulation creates an opportunity for haves to rule over the have-nots.
There has not been a single case in history where this has been shown to be the case. Every single time, this has been done with regulatory capture. It is not only possible only when regulations are in place, it is inevitable.
This is one of the many reasons for regulation, to ensure that the rich few do not impose their will unjustly or destructively on the poor multitudes.
Oh, really? And who is writing these regulations, huh? It's the rich few. The rich few in power who do not care about the poor multitudes, other than using them as political fodder the way you just did. There has been no point in history where the well-being of the poor and working class improved at the rate that it did in 19th century America when regulations were very minimal. The freest market in the world, Hong Kong, went from slums to prosperity in just a few decades, even with no natural resources whatsoever. Whereas democratic socialism in Venezuela has resulted in starvation and food riots, despite the fact that Venezuela has a year-round growing season, the world's largest proven oil reserves, and wonderful tourist destinations. It's very much a best-case scenario, and socialism failed, whereas Hong Kong is pretty much a worst-case scenario, and capitalism has succeeded beautifully. And before you go on with the usual excuse statists come back with about how Hong Kong has a port and somehow this makes it different, the carrying capacity of Venezuela's ports is far greater than Hong Kong's.
Another libertarian belief is the idea that the government should not be allowed to impose its will on the citizenry. However, in a truly free market that promotes freedom of contract and deregulation, employers have a right to force rules that would never be permitted in our current democratic systems.
No, they don't! They don't have any power or ability to force anything. Contracts must be voluntarily agreed to in order to be valid. When it's forced, it's called duress, and the contract is void.
Libertarianism is a rich man's ideal.
Then how come so few rich men are in favor of it? How come most of them support progressive causes and regulation of business? I'll tell you why. Because they know they can absorb the costs of complying with these regulations, and their smaller competition can't. Every single regulation increases the costs of doing business in some way. They will always favor rich people and powerful corporations over less wealthy individuals and small businesses.
It ostensibly gives ultimate freedoms and choice to everyone at the cost of helping the helpless.
Oh, really? Well, I've got another scatterplot to show you. Voluntary private social spending. How much people give charitably of their own accord without government force. Notice that it is greater the freer the market is. Oh, and that dot way up there at the top? That's the United States. No other country comes close to the generous giving of American citizens. By the way, we're more than halfway through the video and I haven't seen him give any data, sources, or analysis backing him up. Looks like it's just more bald assertions with nothing whatsoever to back them up. Christopher Hitchens famously said, "What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence." So I don't need to show all this data and evidence debunking his claims, but I do anyway. If nothing else, it's fun.
It completely ignores the reality of economic forces, which compel the poor to take jobs they don't want to and live where they don't want to just because they have to.
Oh, really? And it's better with statism. How? You know, the most disingenuous thing about this is how much the state inhibits freedom of movement. The U.S. has an expat tax of over $2,000 for anyone wanting to leave the country. Even just to travel within the country with any degree of efficiency, you have to put up with a TSA that can grope your junk and detain you for no reason. Even driving around the country, police can pull you over for no reason, demand that you show your papers, and detain you for whatever reason they like. Sometimes they just do it because they got permission from a dog. And everything from zoning to housing restrictions severely limit where people can live and create businesses. So the idea that people can't live and work where they want is a glass house I don't think you want to be throwing stones in. The fact is, the free market gives people better choices, the ultimate being to create your own business if you don't like the other options available. Again, things like zoning and occupational licensing severely limit the number of people to do that, and it disproportionately hurts marginalized groups such as poor blacks.
You can't completely deny that.
I think I just did, because it's not true. Once again, we see how statism is a religion with tenets you're just not allowed to disagree with.
And while individual freedoms extending to property rights are in the forefront of the core principles of libertarianism, deregulation in a free market economy that will lead to an even bigger wealth gap sounds like the prologue to the movie Elysium, starring Matt Damon, or Snowpiercer, or any other dystopian future pick where classism runs rampant and the massive lower income classes rise against their small but incredibly wealthy oppressors.
You know, it'd be great for once if statists would get their information from economics books instead of works of fiction cooked up in the imagination of writers.
If you really want to understand what would happen in a libertarian society, watch that movie, watch Elysium.
No, study economics.
We will likely continue to make technological advancements that allow for robotic arms like the ones that Matt Damon uses in that movie, but increasingly in service to a narrower and narrower segment of the population.
Where on earth did you get that idea? If one thing is clear above anything else, it's that the free market makes new technologies cheaper and cheaper so that the poor can now afford smartphones and high-definition TVs. Capitalism also results in fewer skipped meals for the poor, especially poor children. It results in greater living space, better temperature controls, and cheaper, more efficient transportation, something else the government can't seem to live up to anytime it tries.
Now, you may see the poor or the underclass as weak.
No, you're the one who sees them as weak, and therefore in need of mommy government to protect them. Libertarians see them as beautiful, amazing, clever human beings with the potential to be great if only they would be set free.
But weak as they are...
See? I said you were the one seeing them as weak. And you people thought I was strawmanning, weren't you?
there are going to be a hell of a lot more of them than there are of you.
Yes, which is why the economy will drive itself towards their needs. It's a huge market that will not be ignored.
So in the hopes of avoiding the fate of the monarchy during the French Revolution,
Oh yeah, because that worked out so well for the revolutionaries, didn't it?
maybe it's best to retain welfare and at least a modest social safety net, if for no other reason than to keep them from grabbing their pitchforks and turning on you.
Can you name one single case where capitalism resulted in this? When people turn like this, or when they risk their lives building makeshift boats to escape their country, it's always because of an intrusive state that will not let them breathe free.
In the end, libertarianism is similar to communism.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that was the wrong time to take a drink. Hang on. Oh. I'm okay now. Libertarianism and communism are diametrically opposed. Libertarianism is an individualist philosophy, while communism is a collectivist philosophy. There isn't any way at all that the two are similar. However, the things that you've been advocating, like the social safety net and strong business regulations, are what communism and other forms of socialism are all about. And again, they result in misery and the collapse of society.
On its face, they're both noble but impossibly ambitious theories.
What's impossibly ambitious about leaving people the hell alone as long as they're not harming others?
One has individual freedom as its core principle and the other equality. However, in practice, both concepts lead to outcomes that aren't as pure.
I've shown copious evidence here that this just isn't the case. And again, he's shown no evidence whatsoever.
Unlike communism, we've yet to see libertarianism crumble after application.
Gee, imagine that.
But given the current state of the Republican Party,
What the hell does the Republican Party have to do with libertarianism? Oh, right, I forgot. Earlier you made it clear that you have a cultist mindset and just lump everyone who doesn't agree with you into the not we, and therefore Republicans are just like libertarians. Even though, as I said, libertarians draw just as much support from Democrats. What's it going to take, people? What's it going to take for you to attempt to debunk libertarianism based on what we really say and base your arguments on evidence and data? Because if you keep going the way you are now, we're going to assume that you can't do that, because the evidence and data never go your way, and so we'll toss you onto the intellectual dung heap with creationists, homeopaths, and people who think the Library of Congress changed the name of the Berenstain Bears. Until next time, stay strong and be free.